Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for a conversation about public education with our Governor, Ward Cooper. My name is Yvonne Brannon. I'm Chair of Public Schools First. I want to tell you that this conversation will be recorded and we will be posting it on YouTube after the presentation tonight. Due to our limited time, we will not be taking questions from the audience, but I hope that you will sit tight and enjoy our conversation. And before we get started, I want to welcome my panelists who are joining me tonight. I first want to introduce to you Lindsay Wagner. Lindsay is a senior writer and researcher at the Public School Forum of North Carolina. She writes about issues pertaining to education in North Carolina with a particular focus on transparency and accountability. Prior to joining the Public School Forum, Lindsay worked as an education writer and researcher for the Fletcher Foundation, and before that, she was an education reporter for North Carolina Policy Watch. Lindsay has an undergraduate degree in French and Business from the University of Maryland, College Park, and holds a master's degree in International Education Policy from the same university. Also joining me tonight is the PTA president of North Carolina, Harold Dixon. Harold is a native of Goldsboro, North Carolina, and a graduate of Johnson C. Smith University. He is currently a family engagement specialist with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools and has been with the school district for 32 years. Harold was the first African-American male president of the Mecklenburg PTA Council, and he received the prestigious NCPTA Oakleaf Award for creating the Male Engagement Initiative, Be Their Dad. Harold is also the current Assistant Director of Music for the Prince of Peace Lutheran Church. For some of our guests tonight, I would like to give you a little bit of background about our governor. Governor Cooper was born and raised in Nash County. He attended public schools there and worked summers on his family farm. Then he attended UNC Chapel Hill on a Moorhead scholarship. After earning a law degree from the same university, he returned to Nash County to practice law. With his wife, Kristen, they raised 3 daughters, Hillary, Natalie, and Claire. He served as a state house member and a Senate majority leader, and then as our attorney general for 16 years before, in 2016, he was elected as the governor of North Carolina. So welcome, Governor, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we look forward to an interesting evening to find more out about education issues and what you're planning and what you've been doing for North Carolina. So to start, we're going to let Lindsay kick us off tonight.
Governor Cooper, on behalf of the Public School Forum, thank you so much for being with us to discuss the most important issues facing public education in North Carolina right now. As Yvonne mentioned, I'll be asking you the first question, and that is, what do you view as the top 2 or 3 problems facing our children's education in North Carolina? And what are your suggestions to address them, both in terms of the current pandemic we are facing now and beyond?
Thank you, Lindsay. Nothing is more important to North Carolinians than our public schools. My mom was a public school teacher. I'm a product of the public schools. This is personal to me. First, we can't keep leaving our teachers behind and expecting them to lead our students into the future. We have to pay them substantially more. And a pay package is going to be critical to recruiting the kinds of teachers that we need. Secondly, we have to invest in early childhood education for our children's future. We've got to invest from cradle to career. But whether or not we have this COVID situation going on, and we're going to for the next little while, we have to invest in remote learning and make sure we have high-speed internet access to all parts of our state, make sure that children have devices, and make sure that families can afford to access that internet once they have it. So these are investments that we've got to make both with this COVID crisis and when we get beyond it.
Thanks so much.
Governor Cooper, on behalf of the 109,000 PTA members in North Carolina, I want to say thank you for being with us tonight. And my question is related to the Leandro report. For about a quarter of a century, North Carolina has been engaged in a school funding court case known as Leandro to ensure that we provide a sound basic education for every child. In a landmark report, an independent consultant found that our state, North Carolina, must increase investments in our public schools to provide a sound basic education. Earlier this month, Judge David Lee, who is overseeing the Leandro case, signed off on a plan for us to make critical progress towards our constitutional obligations. What recommendations in this landmark report do you think are the most critical?
Thank you, Harold, and I'm grateful for our parents. Both Kristen and I logged a lot of time, a lot of PTA time when our children were in public schools, and most teachers and teacher assistants will tell you that they can't do it without you, particularly with your presence, your financial support, your moral support. Thank you for that. One of the reasons that I appointed my committee on access to a sound basic education was to help with the Leandro lawsuit. And one of the reasons that I and the Attorney General talked about trying to find a settlement of this case that truly invests to make sure every child has the opportunity, that is critical. First, early childhood has to be an emphasis for investment. We know it starts early. We know it starts at birth, and making sure that children have access to early education, health care, all of the things that we know that can help that child grow and have more opportunities. We have to make that early investment. So you're going to see us looking at Judge Lee's order and making sure that we're doing what we need to do to make those early childhood investments. Secondly, I'm excited about teacher recruitment. I know that we need to do everything in our power to attract and retain the very best teachers. We also need to work on attracting and retaining more teachers of color, because we know all students do better when their teachers are diverse. We have to work on that pay package I talked about, but we also have to do more to let teachers know that they are professionals and that we want to help them, and we want to pay them more when they get their master's degrees, and we want to pay attention to making sure they have time to do lesson planning. Treat this profession like it is a profession. And I'm excited about us being able to do that. And we know that this is even more important during this time of pandemic, when our teachers are challenged even more than before.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up, because in the report, racism has been an issue in North Carolina for 300 plus years. But when you review the Leandro report and seeing it is rarely mentioned, can we truly make change with our stating the obvious, without stating the obvious in North Carolina? Can we truly say that we're making change?
No, we have to state the obvious. We have to state the obvious that there is systemic racism in our education system, in our economic system, in our criminal justice system, and we have to tackle it. It's one of the reasons why I have appointed the Andrea Harris Task Force, chaired by my Secretary of Administration, Michelle Sanders. One of the areas that it will examine openly is racism in our education system. And we need to tackle it head on. And one of the ways to do that is to attract more teachers of color. I believe, I haven't looked at these statistics lately, but about half of our student population, maybe a little more than half, are students of color, yet only about 22% of our teachers are teachers of color. When you look at the statistics. We had John King, the former Secretary of Education under President Obama, come. I appointed a task force called the Drive Task Force, which is going to work to recruit more teachers of color into the system. Studies show that not only do children of color do much better when their teachers are diverse, and a lot of that has to do with expectations and relatability and those kinds of things, but all students do better when teachers are diverse. So we must take this issue head on, and we must look at those systemic issues that affect our children across the board. And we have to look at curriculum, we have to look at all of the issues that affect this. And I look forward to, particularly after these elections are going to tell us a lot. Are we going to make changes in our legislature? Are we going to re-elect me as governor? Are we going to make those things, those changes we need to make in order to improve public education? And I hope everybody out there, when they're voting for their legislator, they look at public education and whether they're going to provide health care as the top two issues.
Thank you.
So, Governor, I want to switch just a little bit and kind of follow up also with something that Harold mentioned that was talked about a little bit in the Leandro report. But right now, our school systems, many of our teachers are involved in this process, are feeding almost 1.5 million kids every day. And we know that some of this is related to the pandemic, but we also know that North Carolina has some bad statistics in terms of poverty and how many children are living in poverty and how many children are food insecure. So when we look beyond the pandemic, what can North Carolina do to permanently fix this issue, to really address poverty, especially for our children, and try to lift North Carolina out of those bad statistics where we have 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 kids being food insecure, hungry, or living in poverty. We know that when kids can't eat, they don't learn. When kids come to school with issues of homelessness, they have a hard time functioning. So what are your thoughts about this, Governor?
Well, first, I'm so grateful for our public school educators and our school staff that step up to help children in so many ways in our education system that works to approach it holistically. So proud of them pulling together to make sure that students and their families continue to receive nutritious meals, even in the middle of remote learning when children weren't physically in the building. That's just a fantastic achievement that took a lot of hard work from bus drivers and cafeteria workers and school staffers, as well as teachers and teacher assistants, and I'm grateful for them. I think we've got to do several things, Yvonne. First, we've got to invest in early childhood. And I know I keep coming back to that, but the first few years of a child's life are critical. Second, we got to expand Medicaid. We have to close this health care coverage gap. Mothers who are on Medicaid, as soon as they have their child, they're off of it. That's wrong. If we can expand Medicaid like 39 other states have done and cover more working North Carolinians, then this will be good for our children. Healthy parents are more likely to have healthy children. And we're going to have to also make sure that we look at the whole child. We got to invest in school nurses and school psychologists and counselors to help that surround. Not having our children physically in the school building is really hard on a lot of levels, because our schools can refer children to other services that they desperately need, particularly our children who are at risk and children who are in poverty. And there's a reason why child abuse reports are down, is because children are not in school. And we have to invest more in that end too. I'm going to make, in my second term, the state hasn't had as much to do with affordable housing as local and federal has, but we need to do more to make sure that there is affordable housing for families. I've tutored in our schools for decades, and a number of children that I tutored actually were homeless. A lot of people don't think about students being homeless, but many of them are not really sure where they're going to spend the night the next night, at a hotel or at a grandparents or at a friend's, and that's actually happened to these students. And how are they going to learn and concentrate when they don't even have a home? So we got a lot of work to do, but I'm excited about what we can do.
Okay, and you actually have already touched on what was going to be my next question. So let me talk a little bit more about it. Public Schools First has been traveling across the state for the last 3 years, showing a film called Resilience. And it talks a lot about adverse childhood experiences and how important it is to teach children resilience, but also how important it is to intervene when there are adverse childhood experiences and the impact they're having on children, to look for ways to intervene and to look for ways to help staff learn how to deal with children with adverse childhood experiences. So one of the things that comes up obviously in this is the severe need for, as you said, to have those helping professionals in the school, to have those social workers who are connecting kids and families, to working in the community, to have those nurses who are there to help address physical needs of children, medical needs of children, school psychologists to help children who are dealing with many of the impacts of homelessness, poverty, and even sometimes other mental deficits. And then the whole notion of counselors. So I want to go back to it one more time and talk about what can we do? Is this a state responsibility? Should we be funding these positions in our school? Give us some thoughts on how you think we can actually get to a point where our community sees that helping professionals are part of the staff that makes the whole child.
Part of the funding cuts that have occurred over the years as a result of the leadership in the General Assembly has forced schools to cut back on these important positions like school nurses and counselors and psychologists and social workers. Talk to most any teacher, and I go into a lot of our public schools. They're the ones who recognize issues with students, and they desperately want specialists that they can refer the student to make sure that the student gets some help. One of the reasons why I devoted a substantial amount of CARES Act funding for our schools, for more school nurses, counselors, and psychologists and social workers, is because we know that these children need that extra attention and care. We know that we've got a pandemic, so more school nurses is a layup because of the physical potential problems that can occur. But that also can be an opportunity in crisis, because we know that these children need help with these adverse childhood experiences. The great thing about children is that they are resilient, but the bad thing we know is that too many adverse childhood experiences are very difficult for them to overcome later in their life. So we have to treat this early, and schools are where the children are. And so we need to have these personnel there to help these children and help them get them to the right place so they can help deal with what's happening. One of the exciting things that our Department of Health and Human Services is doing is using Medicaid dollars. We've gotten a big waiver approved to apply toward what's called social determinants that can help people stay healthy and use these dollars for prevention. Some child who continues having asthma attacks, instead of using Medicaid dollars to continue to treat that child, why don't we go and remove the moldy carpet in the child's house that is causing the asthma to occur? So we've got to look at this holistically, and we've got to look at our early childhood action plan, which I think is one of the best in the country, that talk about setting goals for children. And Harold, you mentioned the question about race earlier. We specifically have goals to make sure we are dealing with the racial inequities that exist in our public schools, both from an education and health perspective. So I'm excited about continuing these things, and we've got to make sure that if we've got particularly if we got a better General Assembly this time, that we can make more investments. And even with the General Assembly that we might have, we need to push them to do even more.
Thank you.
Governor, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the school voucher program. You called for a moratorium on the controversial school voucher program, which sends public dollars to private schools. But the General Assembly has steadily expanded this program over the past several years, with a big expansion coming in the COVID relief bill that was passed earlier this month. Can you tell us a little bit about your view on school vouchers and how you think it impacts education overall?
School vouchers are wrong. They hurt public schools, they hurt students. My opponent, the Lieutenant Governor, has one goal for public schools, and that is to starve them and use the tax money to help rich people send their children to private school using vouchers. Right now, the General Assembly has means tested vouchers, and only people below a certain income get to take advantage of them. But my opponent, the Lieutenant Governor's plan, allows anybody to get money through private school vouchers. And this is Robin Hood in reverse. It's robbing from the public schools and giving to rich people to be able to send their children to private schools. And many of the schools that people can afford with the private school voucher are schools that are completely unaccountable, and maybe some of them discriminate. And it is a wrong use of state tax dollars, and it needs to stop.
Thank you.
Governor Cooper, because my career is now in education, but I didn't intentionally start out there. I started out as a school bus driver in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and my passion for children kind of crept up, and I stayed in education for now 34 years. North Carolina has a well-documented teacher recruitment and retention crisis. So what strategies will you advocate to improve teacher recruitment and retention?
Got to pay them better, number one. We've got to do that, and we can do better than we have. I pushed this legislature hard, and as a result, North Carolina has raised teacher pay and expanded pre-K and reestablished the Teaching Fellows program, but we've got to do a lot more. For example, the Teaching Fellows program. We need to expand it to all of our state campuses. It's wrong to have no HBCUs as part of the Teaching Fellows program. It's one of the best deals that I can think of. Say to a student, hey, we're going to pay for 4 years of your public college education or your college education, and in exchange, we need 4 years at least of you teaching in our public schools. When we first started the Teaching Fellows Scholarship Program, I was on one of the very first interview teams, and I was stunned to see we were getting the top students across the state who were willing to be teachers. We have to use this tool of scholarships, and we have to think of other incentives for getting people into the teaching profession. Our teacher pipeline is in trouble. It's going to get worse with this pandemic. We need to do more than ever to let people know that teaching profession is honorable. It is a calling in life, and that you're going to be able to make a decent living and have a rewarding experience being a teacher in North Carolina public schools. And as governor, I want to continue to talk about that across our state. As I visited classrooms, and obviously during the pandemic, I haven't been able to do it, but one of the questions I would always ask is, who wants to be a teacher when you grow up? We have more hands earlier in the earlier grades than we would in the later grades, but I would talk about how important it is for us, our students, to become teachers. And we also need to think about other adults who could enter into the profession to get them there. Better pay, better benefits, treating them better, incentives to encourage people to get into this profession, and we have to make it a priority.
So let me follow up with that, because some advocate for pay for performance, the pay for performance model for education. What's your position on that? And you spoke a lot about teachers of color when we were talking about the Leandro report. How do we retain more teachers of color? So there's two questions I just gave you.
Well, you know, the pay for performance thing, I understand the concept, but let me just step back a minute. You know, we've been trying to reach some bipartisan agreements on things, and I was meeting with a group of Republican legislators, and we were talking about vouchers and pay for performance and that type of thing. But you know, there were two things that we agreed upon that would significantly improve public education in North Carolina. One is a good teacher in every classroom, and the other is a good principal in every school. So in talking to CEOs about their companies, I say, what you do is you recruit good people and let them do their thing and do what they do best. And I think we need to concentrate more on attracting, developing, and retaining those good personnel, those good teachers, and those good principals. Pay them all well. Encourage them to make themselves better. If they're going to go get their master's or become a mentor for another teacher, I think that those kinds of incentives work better, because you know, we've seen how divisive that some pay for performance can be, and I'm not sure it has it ends up with the goal that everybody wants. So I think we should concentrate our resources and efforts on getting those great personnel in those important positions.
Governor, I want to circle back with you a little bit and talk about charter schools. These are charter schools are another reform effort that generates a lot of debate, and many say that it's unfair that charter schools play by different rules and lack sufficient oversight. How would you respond to these concerns?
I think a limited number of public charter schools have their place in our system. And I think that they can be important for us to be able to try new things that we can use in our public schools if they work. And I think that that may be where we haven't done as well as I would like to see us do, is to really measure how our charters are doing and what's really working, and taking those and using those in our public schools. I don't like the fact that of charters being unlimited. I think that is a problem and can ultimately hurt our public school system. But I do think they have a place in our system, particularly if we can use them the right way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. So one of the questions that I'd like to ask you, Governor, is that a lot of people like me, I have grandchildren in the school system now. My kids have graduated, but I'm watching what's going on with remote learning and trying to open schools and close schools, and I'm watching what's going on. How do we keep our teachers' motivation up? How do we keep our teachers' morale up during this really trying time? Do you have any words or of wisdom or advice or any suggestions what parents can do or our community can do? Because this is truly a trying time on the teaching profession.
You know, we are trusting our teachers to lead our students into the future. We need to put our money where our trust is. I think one of the best things for teacher morale is to make sure that they know that their state cares about them, and we want to invest in their pay in order to make sure that we can attract and retain the best. Secondly, I urge people to get to know what's going on in the public schools and to talk about it positively. A lot of people who really don't know what's happening in the public school complain about it from afar. but there are a lot of positive things going on. And if we can lift up our public schools and show the good things that are happening, I think that helps as well. And during this pandemic, it has been extraordinarily hard on teachers, on parents. I've talked to a number of them, and this is most frustrating. What we have to do is to try to provide teachers with some help. My North Carolina Business Committee for Education already is holding training programs for teachers on how to teach remotely. A number of them are great teachers, but this is something that they've never experienced. And particularly our teachers of at-risk children and teachers of the much younger children, remote learning is very, very difficult. So we need to provide them with the training and help and assistance to help them deal with this crisis that we face right now, and know that on the other side, we're going to be there for them and send the signal that we're going to invest in our public schools and work to make them stronger than ever. I'm grateful for them, and I let them know that their governor talks about them positively and often, because I'm truly grateful for the great work that they do.
I love that your suggestion about being positive. I think it is so easy to be critical, and what our teachers don't need right now, my view as a Grammy, is for people to be criticizing their very best effort under trying times. Lindsay asked a question at the beginning of the show about the pandemic, and one of the things you mentioned, Governor, was about the getting broadband, high-speed internet, and how challenging that is. And so folks should probably understand that we have, over thousands and thousands of children who do not have broadband internet right now. And even if they have devices, they don't have internet. So I appreciate your comments about that, and I appreciate your comments about staying positive. Lindsay and Harold, did you have any follow-up questions you would like for the governor before I'll give him an opportunity for closing remarks? Any follow-ups with you, Lindsay?
I don't think so. I have 2 children in public schools as well, and I definitely agree that teachers are the heroes of this pandemic, along with healthcare workers and many others on the front line. So thank you for your support for our teachers.
Harold?
Yes, Governor Cooper, thank you for all that you're doing to support our teachers. Me being a part of the public education system, I know how it's important to keep our teachers motivated and the morale up. So thank you for all of your efforts. I'm in the classrooms daily. I'm also in the homes of parents. So I get to see firsthand what's going on when we talk about the pandemic, how it's affecting our parents. I have conversations with many of them. So thank you for our efforts in North Carolina for your leadership. Thank you.
So Governor, I would like to give you a chance now. We've taken you through a series of questions. We'd like to give you a chance to make some closing remarks on your own.
When people go to the polls, think about what the candidates are doing for public education, and understand that this pandemic has put us behind. Already, education is facing challenges, but with this pandemic, we know that students are going to be behind academically, maybe socially, and have other issues that have arisen since children had not been in school in person. As governor, I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that we get our children back into school as quickly and as safely as possible. My opponent, the lieutenant governor, has said come January 1st, he's filling up the classrooms no matter what. We have to put safety over politics, and we have to do more for our public schools, not less, because we're in the biggest challenge of our lifetime here. And that means we're going to have to invest even more in education in order for us to get our students where they need to be in this new world, and new jobs and new skills. And I am committed to education and all that it can do for our workforce, and to bring about my mission for North Carolina, and that is to have a state where people are better educated, where they're healthier, more money in their pockets, and they have opportunities to live lives of purpose and abundance. That's what I want, and strong public education can help fulfill that mission. I appreciate everybody listening tonight, and I would appreciate deeply your support.
So I just want to say thank you to the governor. I want to thank Lindsay and Harold. You know, between the three of us, I think we figured out that we have almost 500,000 viewers on our newsletter or our Facebook and our Instagram and our Twitter. I think I left something out in the social media there. But so we are really excited to have this conversation tonight. We're going to be sharing it right after the end of this program tonight as quick as we can. We'll have this presentation up on YouTube so you can share it with your friends if they weren't here with you tonight. And you know, one of the reasons that the organizations here tonight wanted to talk about public education, it is our mission. Public School Forum of North Carolina PTA, representing teachers and parents, students, public schools first. Our mission is to provide the public with information and education and encourage them to be engaged, to be public education voters, and to learn about the issues that impact our children and our students and our parents. And so this is really important. So we all invite you to please consider going to our websites and connecting with us. You know, we all have active newsletters that go out weekly. We have a lot of information that we post about national and state issues as well as local issues. So please connect with us. You know how it goes. You know the drill. Like us, friend us, tweet us, follow us, whatever. But we really would appreciate it. And most importantly, Governor, we appreciate that as busy as you are, you took some time tonight to talk to our parents and to our teachers and to let everyone know where you stand on public education in North Carolina. So with that, thank you all for joining me tonight, and good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.